episode number 146 of the LSR podcast. My name is Matt Brown, joined each and every week by the brightest minds in all the gaming industry. With me, I have Adam Candy. I have Dustin Gowker. You can follow them on the Twitter meme for free, and you should. It's at Dustin Gowker, at Adam Candy, 2 E's, no Y. If you hate yourself, you can follow me at Matt Brown M2. We're on all the places that you get your podcast, so please go in, subscribe, rate, and review. We'll talk some Kansas. We will talk some Massachusetts. We will talk some very rich Fertittas. We will also talk some Canada stuff as well, our state rundown as everything else. But let's Adam, let's talk about draft betting, and mainly I actually sent you a text at some point over the course of the week as well, because I was getting questions as to, hey man, I'm in XYZ, why can't I bet on the draft? And I'm in this place, whatever, yada yada yada. So why don't we clear some of that up? Why were some people able to bet on the NFL draft and other people not able to bet on the NFL draft?
So the surface level answer, Matt, is that this is about rules and regulations put in place at the state level. It's important to understand that each state sets its own rules. There is no federal rule or national rule about what's allowed and what's not. Each state can choose to allow anything that it wants to allow in terms of permitted events. We can look at a state like Pennsylvania, for example, that started its legal sports betting market with no betting on the draft and has been consistent throughout with that. You can look at a place like where we live in Nevada, where they have weird rules about pulling the draft bets down 24 hours before the event starts. These are all set individually by the regulators in that state. Now, if we get down to the slightly deeper level on this, Matt, and I know you have opinions on this as well, this is an old school versus new school bookmaking question. The old school bookmakers very simply do not like putting up draft bets. They believe that the market is largely a sharp market, that it's not a very public market, that they end up losing money consistently on it. And so in a state like Nevada, you're not going to have pressure from the bookmakers to change these rules. They're going to be very happy keeping them just as they are. So reporting from ESPN, talked to the Nevada Gaming Control Board. The spokesperson said the rules and regulations are in place because the draft is not based on actual events on the field. It is an event based on selections being made with a lot of insider information flowing around. That kind of gets to the point where I start to have some issues with the way that we regulate this, because there are ways for bookmakers to control markets that have to do with inside information without there being regulations that either prevent it entirely or that pull it down. That's what limits are for. That's what select markets are for. That's what being able to pull individual markets down is for, if you think that those are particularly exposed to inside information. And there was one in particular this year with one particular draft prospect's position that I know that there was a lot of concern about insider information. So I think this is a real old school, new school thing. The new school being, you need to be able to differentiate your product. And draft betting is one of those things that across the country can differentiate your product. So I'll turn the floor back after this. Think about the fact that the NFL draft was held in Las Vegas at a time when fans from across the country, 100,000, according to the NFL, 99% of them wearing some sort of team-affiliated gear, are showing up in town wanting to bet on the draft, and they are not able to. And you're having to explain to them from Wednesday at 5 p.m. through the entirety of the draft why there's no draft betting available in Nevada. And it essentially comes down to crankiness and old-school mentality.
Adam, your friend and mine, Dave Farah, hosted about 4 different events down there on the strip for over the course of the last couple of days, and he said, I'm not exaggerating, more than 6 times I got asked by people why I cannot go place a bet on the draft, and he's like, Dave's not really into the rules of everything, so he's like, I don't really know. All I know is that it's been this way ever since I've lived here. And it's kind of like you said, Adam, there's no groundswell from the books themselves to get it changed, because they're more than happy to pull them 24 hours before the actual draft. And so you're definitely right. There were a lot of people who flew into town, got here, had no idea whatsoever, probably came from a state in which they would have been able to live trade the draft, I might add, because there were live betting opportunities during the draft. And Dustin, instead, they get on the ground. And, New York was not able to bet the draft. And then I talked to Johnny Avello from DraftKings, and the weird thing just about, Adam, you're talking about how just different states wrote in different things into laws, and some things may or may not be legal, so they just chose not to do certain things, whatever. So there were states where you could bet on the draft before the draft started, but they were not sure whether you could actually live bet the draft, and so you couldn't live bet the draft in certain states. So it was like you could bet it before it happened, but live betting the draft, they were like, yeah, we couldn't really tell whether they were okay with it or not, so we just didn't do it. So there was all kinds of murkiness with all this.
Yeah, I mean, the other funny part is, is any book really going to lose its shirt on draft betting? They have limits on these things. They're not taking six-figure bets on largely on draft positions and things like that. So this is sportsbooks like to complain about things. They're not losing their tons of money on this. This is why it's really more, I think, in the new states, outside of Nevada, it's a customer acquisition retention tool. It's like something else to do while you're watching the draft. People are going to watch the draft anyway. Oh, well, maybe I'll have some money on the draft. It's just something else to engage with. It's a second screen experience while you're watching the draft, which is fun. It's fun to watch a draft, but yeah, let's all say it's certainly more fun to have a little bit of some sweat on what's going on when all this stuff is getting announced. So yeah, the funny part to me is yes, there's inside information probably going around. That it'll be reflected in the market. Nobody's taking enough money on this for it to really matter on the grand scheme of things. So I'd rather just see a little bit more open market everywhere. People aren't going to go back into laws and change them. You're right about Nevada. I'm sure, Adam, that there's zero pressure to change this. So it is what it is at this point. But there's confusion around draft betting pretty much everywhere right now.
And Adam, I can only assume, and I'm just completely speaking without any inside knowledge here, whatever. I can only assume by this time next year, we'll at least have clarification in New York one way or the other, like whether they're going to be able to take draft betting or not. I mean, the answer very well might be no, I guess, but at least we'll have some clarification one way or another, I would assume.
Yeah, and for the latest on this, I would suggest following one of our good friends over at Play New York. Mike Mazzio does a great job of covering the New York sports betting market. You can find him on Twitter, and he talked to Senator Joe Adaba, who's been at the heart of all this. And what we found out before the draft was essentially imagine a room full of lawyers all the way up to draft day trying to parse through the law and the rules to figure out whether or not this was something they could do. That was the scene in New York as we tried to straighten out what was going on with the draft. And keep in mind that how many years in a row was the NFL draft held in New York? Now, we're going to another legal sports betting state next year, right? Or 2 years. We're going to Michigan, right? We're going to have a draft in Michigan. So if we have a draft in Michigan, we're going to be doing this again when it comes to making sure that we can offer draft betting markets. And, Matt, you know this as well as I do. There was one book in town in particular that did not put up its draft betting markets until 4 days before the draft, when I've been betting at certain books in town since February. They didn't put up the markets till 4 days before and then put them up with $1,000 limits. And I saw a professional bettor saying, hey, all right, $1,000 limits. Finally, I can get some action down on this. Think about what a $1,000 limit looks like on an average NFL Sunday when sides are updated on a Sunday morning. Most books, by the time they have the liquidity in for sides on a Sunday morning, are opening up to 50 and 100K.
Yeah, Dustin, you're 100% correct. They're not going to lose. They're not going to lose their shirts on this at all by opening. It is one of those things where I can't wrap my brain around it. I think it's a lot to keep up with, and maybe some of these books just decide it's not worth the trouble or whatever to keep up with stuff. But I mean, you looked at DraftKings even Thursday night before the draft. Trayvon Walker got steamed all the way up to minus 800, and if you're listening to this, I assume you know what that means. But that means you have to bet $800 to win 100. You're not losing your shirt over that, because there is a very minute amount of bettors out there who are ever going to bet $800 to win $100. It doesn't matter how sure thing anything is, right? I mean, most people are just risk averse when it comes to stuff like that. And so you're right. I mean, that's the juice changes, the limits change, all the different stuff like that. So if you choose not to offer this stuff, it is strictly because you just don't want to deal with it.
Yeah. And again, broken record, you can do this offshore. You have
Right.
been able to do this offshore for forever.
Forever.
So that's not always a reason to have a market or allow a certain type of betting, but this certainly is, because they're going to take that action if you don't. So you might as well.
Dustin, let's talk about Kansas while we're here.
Yes. Do we have geography questions? I feel
No,
like we should.
this one I'm just going to go
No?
straight Kansas. Just talk
Wait
about
a second.
it.
I do. What's the capital of Kansas, Matt?
Kansas is the capital of Kansas is Topeka.
Wow, we did not practice that.
That was
straight.
about plus 250 for a yes on that one. So
I knew it. I did not know if Matt would know that. That's amazing. Amazing work,
Kansas.
Matt. Can't stop
Yep.
Matt.
Telling you.
Anyway, to the news. Rock Chalk. We're going to have sports betting in Kansas, pretty much, almost certainly, unless something wild happens. Basically, we got the House and the Senate both approved a bill this week, going to the governor. Just needs the governor's signature. So yeah, basically Kansas, you're getting sports betting. It should be a pretty decent market there in Kansas when it gets going. I think we're basically throwing darts at when it might launch, but there has been, at least the politicians in the state would like it to be live by NFL season. Whether that's actually possible or feasible, who knows? Because as we'll talk about other states in this podcast, who knows? We've been waiting for Maryland for 2 years. So could Kansas actually go in September? Maybe, but there's no reason not to think at this point the governor has supported sports betting. We believe that it'll be signed and that you'll have a legal sports betting option. And then the wait is then on for Missouri to see if they will follow suit. As Adam and the team have been reporting, Missouri is very interested in what Kansas has done, and this could provide some impetus there. So you could on both sides of the river there and in Kansas City, you might have sports betting in the not too distant future. But for now, good news, barring a last minute change of heart or something weird happening in Kansas, we're going to have sports betting and adding a state to the map this year.
And Adam, if we do geography, Kansas City is right on the border. It's right there. So we could have us a New York, New Jersey situation if Missouri doesn't get their stuff together.
Exactly. And we've said from the jump, it's probably going to be both states or neither. And Governor Laura Kelly has the bill on her desk now in Kansas. If you're trying to handicap, will the bill get signed or will the bill not get signed, understand that with all the states that we have, more than 30 jurisdictions with legal sports betting, there have only been 2 vetoes in the entire time we've done this. Rick Snyder on his way out in Michigan with a big push from the lottery, and Governor Janet Mills in Maine with just one of the stranger vetoes of all time, saying that it was a slippery slope to betting on spelling bees in county elections. Cool story. Yeah. So Missouri, though, did have a stall this week, and it's a stall we've seen in other places. It's not the first time we've seen the addition of VLTs, these video lottery terminals, added into a bill, and VLTs are poison for a lot of people because casinos don't want them. Casinos don't want you being able to game at truck stops and gas stations and other locations, and this was added into the bill. And this is where, as mundane as some of these hearings get, this is where it got a little bit fun for us this week. Matthew Waters, by the way, if you know Matthew Waters, @byMatthewWaters on Twitter, please send him a Starbucks card. He's been up till almost midnight every night this week watching legislative hearings. And in Missouri, Senator Denny Haskins was the one who put in the VLT amendment. It got in, and then another senator tried to pull it out. And the senator got up there and said, okay, I'm going to filibuster. But not this filibuster we hear about at the federal level where it's like, I filibuster, like Michael Scott declaring bankruptcy. No, this is a real filibuster where he said he had 153 amendments ready to offer because he thinks that it is a loss of $153 million to not have this form of gaming added to the state. Eventually, after 3 hours, they gave up. They have 2 weeks left in the legislative session to get something done. But as Dustin said, the push from Kansas getting something done likely will help Missouri as well.
Adam, this is not a geography question by any stretch of the imagination. We're not going to bring up, neighboring states or any of that. We've done it several times already as it is. Anyway, this is more of it just continues to be kind of an LOL situation due to one of the companies that is located in said state. Tell us about Massachusetts.
You referenced DraftKings, headquartered in Boston, which seems to not have the political sway that it's had in other places in terms of accomplishing legalizing sports betting. So on the surface, it doesn't look bad in Massachusetts this week. What you see is the Senate, which has basically shrugged at sports betting for more than a year now, deciding to finally take up the issue and pass a bill, which on the surface looks great, until you look and see what they did to amend that bill, which is sort of like the A.J. Brown contract offer, right? If you really offered him $16 million when other top wide receivers are getting 28, you were never serious about signing A.J. Brown if you were the Titans. Well, if the Massachusetts Senate thinks that a full ban on college betting, as well as some obscure restrictions on advertising that if you look at them on their face are patently unenforceable, they're not even measurable, let alone enforceable, plus a tax rate set at 35% when the House is looking at about a third of that, then you say that the Senate was never really serious about this in the first place. So what we have is a conference committee likely to emerge here because there's almost no chance that the House, which has been way more open to sports betting in Massachusetts, is going to agree to this. The positive is that there is a lot of time to figure this out. You can essentially bring up bills for consideration in Massachusetts all the way through the end of 2022. So is it going to go anywhere with what just happened this week? No. Is it at least theoretically progress? Kind of.
Dustin, let's talk about a rich Fertitta, and this is not one of the Fertittas that used to own the UFC or owns any casinos here in Las Vegas, though he is a relative. Let us talk about Tillman Fertitta of Golden Nugget.
Yeah, the chairman of Golden Nugget Online Gaming, also known for owning some other stuff, Landry's, the Rockets, etc. Right, has been involved with Golden Nugget Online Gaming. This has been in the background. DraftKings bought Golden Nugget a while ago, and it's been really quiet in the background, right? Almost weirdly quiet, right? I think is what we're saying. And he's on CNBC this week and talks, and we have Brad Allen reporting on it over at LSR. And I think we're all pretty aware DraftKings not doing so well on the old stock market these days. Has been trading very low. When this deal went through, GNOG shareholders were getting the 0.365 shares of DraftKings for each share of Golden Nugget, which was a lot of money not that long ago when DraftKings was trading in the $50 to $60 range, now trading well under $20, and a deal that was worth $1.5 billion is now worth obviously considerably less than that, something like 20% less now right now based on DraftKings stock price. So Fertitta, was talking about it, still long on the possibility of DraftKings stock. He said it could go to $100. Sure. I guess that's possible. It could go to $100. I don't know. But that's where we are now. Is things are going. Not this deal should still be going on, but the deal is worth so much less than was made when it was made last August. So we'll see. It's again interesting reporting by Brad. This is coming up, and he's appearing on CNBC and talking about this now. There was a deadline of May 31st for this deal to get done and get consummated. So we'll see. There's again not any real reason for it to not go through, but interesting timing with all of this and the timing. But Fertitta still long DraftKings, like a lot of our listeners, I'm sure.
Adam, I also think it helps whenever you're already filthy rich for stuff like this, right? Like when you're already filthy rich, it's kind of easier to kind of ride stuff out.
Well,
when you've already got a lot of money in the bank.
For example, when I went to pull a picture of Tillman Fertitta to put with this story, most of them were from the White House, where he was at a summit on how to save the economy a couple of months back. So he's that kind of guy.
Yeah. Got some cash, a little bit of pull. So
he'll probably be all right either way, no matter what goes on here.
Yeah. I imagine it could go to zero and he would be okay. He would be fine. Adam, let's talk a little bit about this Canadian market up here and who could possibly be making an entrance into the market.
So this is a sharp pull by our friend Matthew Waters, who noticed a job description on LinkedIn for a Canada country manager. That's not surprising. We're talking a lot about sports betting in Canada. For Pinnacle. Oh, well then. Pinnacle has been in the gray market. And of course, if you're listening to this podcast, you probably don't need us to tell you who Pinnacle is, one of the largest operators in the world, one of the market makers in sports betting, and they appear interested in getting into Ontario. Now, what's interesting about that is we've reported previously about the owner of Pinnacle also expressing some interest through a different company getting into the B2B side of the US market as well. So we're seeing some white market rumblings from Pinnacle in both the US and in Canada. The interesting part in Canada, as Brad reported, and this has been discussed by the Canadian Gaming Association as well, they could essentially try to go white market in Ontario, but stay in the gray market in the rest of Canada until those provinces launch a true white market. So it could be a sort of phase-in approach for Pinnacle when it comes to coming into the white market. But just hearing the name Pinnacle, if you've been following sports betting for any length of time, as a potential white market operator in North America is pretty remarkable.
Absolutely. And I mean, if that does happen in Canada, Dustin, I mean, listen, you want to talk about, every single market being available, every single option, every single whatever. I mean, the one thing about the offshores, like we've always mentioned, is the fact that if they have done anything well over the years, it is certainly providing customers with as many options as humanly possible to get down on things.
Yeah, and it's fascinating to see Pinnacle come back up, because this was like catnip like 2 or 3 years ago. Everybody was like, "When's Pinnacle coming? Where are they coming?" Because people, I mean, they're out there famous for lowest vig, best odds, best market, like lots of stuff. People really dig Pinnacle, right? And it was like, it's just because of the backstory in the U.S. It's a slog, and not likely that they're getting into the U.S. at this point. Now, things could certainly change over time, but the fact that they served the U.S. as a gray market, was a black market previously, and then pulled out, doesn't look great for them to get in here. But Ontario is converting the gray market here, and it's it's interesting to hear this, because among those sleeping giants, Penny is one of those. And I used to get more and more questions about Pinnacle, I think, when all this was ramping up, than anything else. When's Pinnacle coming? When's Pinnacle coming? It's like, probably never. And now, now you at least have it coming possibly to Ontario. And like Adam said, an entry point maybe into future regulated markets in Canada.
Guys, as always, everything we talk about here on the podcast, head over to LegalSportsReport.com. Take in all the words that Adam and team over there are putting up. Again, working hard, doing the grunt work that you don't want to have to do, reading through the bills, listening to the hearings. You don't want to do that. You want to get it all in a couple of minutes, and that's what they do for you over there at LegalSportsReport.com. If you want to follow Dustin at Dustin Gowker, if you want to follow Adam at Adam Candy, that is 2 E's, no why. Guys, as always, every single one of these are on your favorite podcasting platform as well. So we do appreciate any subscriptions, any ratings, any reviews. It does help us climb the charts over there as well. For Adam, for Dustin, I'm Matt. Talk to you guys next week.